The cross is so familiar to Christians that we can forget how difficult it was for the first century to hear its message. We see crosses on churches and paintings, on book covers and around the necks of believers. For us, the cross speaks of forgiveness, hope, sacrifice, and victory. But when Paul preached in Corinth, his listeners did not see a comforting religious symbol. They saw an instrument of public execution, something associated with humiliation, weakness, and disgrace. That difference is essential to understanding. Corinthians, Paul was not presenting the people of Corinth with a message that naturally appealed to their values. The Greeks admired wisdom, polished speech, and intellectual strength. Many Jews expected signs of divine power and a Messiah who would triumph openly over Israel's enemies. Yet Paul placed before both groups the same unsettling announcement. The Messiah had been crucified to one audience that sounded irrational to the other. It seemed completely inconsistent with what God's anointed one should look like. And yet Paul refused to replace the cross with a more respectable message. He did not hide it behind philosophy. He did not soften it to protect his reputation. He did not try to make Christianity impressive according to Corinthian standards. Instead, he wrote, "The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." We may have read those words many times, but have we noticed what Paul is really asking us to reconsider? He is not merely contrasting believers with unbelievers. He is exposing two completely different ways of measuring reality. Human wisdom looks at the cross and sees defeat. God reveals the cross as victory. Human strength avoids shame. Christ enters shame willingly. Human pride wants to contribute something to understand enough, achieve enough, or prove itself worthy. The cross leaves us with empty hands, receiving what we could never accomplish for ourselves. This lesson invites us to look again at the center of the Christian faith, not as a polished symbol, but as the place where God overturned every ordinary definition of wisdom, power, success, and glory. And perhaps the most important question is not whether the cross appears foolish to the world. The deeper question is whether we are still trying to make it fit the world's idea of wisdom, or whether we are willing to let the cross redefine wisdom for us. The message of the cross does not simply give us something to believe. It gives us a new way to see. It teaches us that appearances are not always trustworthy. What looked like Christ's defeat became the defeat of sin and death. What looked like weakness revealed the power of God. What appeared shameful became the clearest revelation of divine love. And that means the cross must change more than our theology. It must change the way we interpret our own lives. Many of us still assume that God is most present when we feel strong, confident, successful, and certain. We imagine that spiritual maturity should make us impressive, that faithfulness should always produce visible results, and that God's blessing should remove weakness from our story. But the cross challenges every one of those assumptions. At Calvary, God did not save through outward strength. He saved through surrender. Christ did not preserve his status, emptied himself. He did not avoid suffering. He entered it. He did not defeat his enemies by becoming more like them. He overcame evil by giving himself in love. So, when we come to our own seasons of weakness, disappointment, obscurity, or unanswered prayer, we should be careful not to call something useless simply because it looks unimpressive. The cross reminds us that God can be most deeply at work where human judgment sees only loss. It also removes every reason for pride. No one stands before the cross as the person who was clever enough to solve the problem. No one arrives with a spiritual resume impressive enough to earn salvation. Come as people who need mercy. We come with nothing to boast about except Christ. That is why the message remains offensive to human pride. The cross does not ask us to improve ourselves until we no longer need rescue. It asks us to admit that rescue must come from outside us, and once we receive that grace, we no longer need to be ashamed when the world calls our faith foolish, nor do we need to become harsh, defensive, or desperate to prove ourselves right. We can speak with humility because the power was never in our eloquence. We can love patiently because we ourselves were saved by mercy. We can remain faithful in weakness because the cross has already shown us that weakness is not the same as defeat. So let the cross remain at the center, not merely as a symbol we recognize, but as the truth that continues to correct our pride, reshape our values, and steady our faith. The world may still call it foolishness, but to those who are being saved, it remains what it has always been: the power of God.